Hi, this is Dana Childs, and our art experience for today is going to be cherry blossoms. Um, it's really exciting because it's one of those experiences and paintings that you can do that every single painting is going to turn out completely different. So that's great. I love that. It's very spontaneous. It's a lot of fun, and you really can't go wrong. So it's a really great way to experience just kind of letting loose. I know I never do that in my lessons. I'm always so tight and constricted and detailed. So, but we'll work on that. Okay? I promise. That's my promise to you. All right. Well, without further ado, let's get started. This is how you want to tear your paper. If you want to ever float a painting, it's a great idea to tear the paper instead of cut it, because then you have sort of deckled edges. These decals don't match these as well. Well, actually that's torn. But this looks more like rag paper here. This doesn't, but it still will float nicely on a background mat. So that's actually not a bad thing at all. So that's something to think about because there's expense. There's expense with everything. And you really want to consider, okay, do I need that added expense right now? Is that something that I need to worry about when the paper already costs a lot and the paint already costs a lot? So if you can float a piece of paper on top of a mat, it saves you quite a bit of money. I think that's been from my experience. So, okay, a lot of times now you can buy the mats already in the frame, but it may not be the color you want. So this way you can spend a little extra money on a mat, but not have to worry about the cutting. Okay, I went out and bought a mat cutter once. Actually, it was a gift from my dad. And he thought, oh, you're going to be professional. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not a professional mat cutter. Every corner was overcut. Yeah. So anyhow, like I said, without further ado, and then I gave you further ado, didn't I? All right, so let me get my hair out of the way. Big old bunch of hair here. I get it in my paintings a lot, so I don't want to have it in my way. This is kind of my tribute to spring. It's always fun to teach. I teach this class at the Pink House in Genoa. Genoa is this really cool old town. It's actually the oldest establishment in the state of Nevada. I just love going out there to paint, and so I have people join me from time to time, so that's kind of fun. All right, well, let's get started on cherry blossoms. So the first thing that you want to do is, I really, on this one, I like spritzing, but I think if I can get a more targeted approach and get some dollops of water. That is the technical term. They're called dollops. It's really hard to see the water on the paper, but trust me when I say I'm creating branching patterns, and I may not use them all. I may not use this one down here. So just thinking for design, I kind of want to go that way. Create a shape in that sense for design. So that feels good to me right now. So now I'm going to mix the colors, which usually you want to mix your colors first, but I wanted to get those dollops on there because they'll sit for quite a while. They're pretty thick loads of water, and then I'll re-spritz and re-dollop in a moment. And you really are just looking at violets and cherry blossom colors for now. This looks super dark, because it's going to be diffused, so I needed to mix it a little bit thick. Okay, now we're going to go a little crazy. Hopefully it's not too thick. So I'm following where I want the water dollops to go. I feel like I need some down here. That's not going to come off that well. Okay. Then I get a little bit of that magenta in there. Just it gives me a little color variation from the gate. And we want areas where the branch can show through as well. Now I take and spritz again, letting that flow wherever it wants to. Careful not to overdo it. You'll know you're overdoing it when it gets too watered down and you don't have, but like right here I didn't get enough. So you're looking to kind of get rid of most of those solid, what look to be red dots at this point. So that's what we're working on now. And this brush has my best tip to it. So before I even add water, and I need a clean, clear water, excuse all the bouncing. I have my platform here raised up just a little. Okay, so now I'm going to take and do the shaky brush move. And just come up on some of these that I feel like I want to leave some of them really dark for future reference, but I'll come up on some of these areas that I feel like, okay, well there's enough paint there that I could share it with a little water puddle that's next to it and wouldn't lose the whole effect. Do you see what I'm saying? We can always add more paint. That is not an issue. And so you're noticing, hopefully, that there's light areas, there's sort of dark areas, there's a potential for a whole lot of blossoms. And of course, you know, I love really heavily laden cherry tree or blossoms on a cherry tree, but I also love to see the branches peek through. So I'm preserving space in between clusters on purpose for that. Just a nice design concept, just to really keep that in mind, you know, and then you can have little renegades here and there. And that light pink that we're getting right now is going to really glow later on. It's going to do a job that you're just going to be like, wow, that's exciting. And one of the mistakes a lot of people make when they first start doing the shaky brush technique is they do this. There's a lot of lines. If you see lines going on with what you're doing, just break it up. You know, just think more circular motions, or just even get even looser with the brush. And just lift up off the paper and then touch down again and lift up and touch down and do whatever it takes. And you might want to practice this on a side sheet of paper before you do this, because it is, I notice when people first do this technique, it's very liney. But then once they get the hang of it, it's a lot easier. So some of my my friends, my art family watching are my Bodacious Brush Crushers. So happy you're here. Thanks for watching and tuning in. For those of you who haven't joined the Bodacious Brush Crushers yet, just go to www.patreon.com, dLauren Fine Arts, and then you can check out a few sample lessons free of charge. It gives you kind of an idea to see if it's a good fit for you or not. And then if you feel like I'm a good art guide and that would be something that works for you, you can join for as little as $10 a month and have access to dozens of fine art lessons. And it's mostly watercolor, but there's drawing, there's perspective, value, design, things that you need to know to make wise art decisions. And that's why I designed the online academy, was to empower people to make their own art decisions, but to kind of know the background and the reasons why art is successful for some people that have been trained. And so having that fine art, you know, sometimes I worried, gosh, I didn't want to get into color theory because I didn't want it messing me up and my own spiritual bent and my own decision making. And I couldn't have been further from the truth, because it ended up being that I really enjoyed going, you know, delving into color theory and applying that to my work and being more successful. So I stopped being afraid of hyper training a long time ago, but I do understand that it does make people feel like it somehow will still or change, you know, their perspective and their own personal touch on the art. So you just have to guard that as you're going, and take what you want to take from it and leave behind the rest. And if you're ready for something new, move on and go in that direction. So that's a good one. Also, I do local and in-person lessons, like this one I taught at the Pink House in Genoa last year. And I'm in and around Lake Tahoe generally, Northern Nevada, Northern California. And if you're interested, if you visit Tahoe, let me know if you want a private lesson. We can sit on the beach and paint somewhere, or if you have a group that you want to bring up, I am more than happy to meet with you and put together a workshop. Got a whole lot of them on hand. Going to do a lot of plein air outings too. For all that information, you can go to dLauren.net. That's dLauren.net, and find out what's on the docket. I'm just now putting together my spring and summer classes and workshops and stuff. So, all right. So did you see what I did there? I just felt like the paint was just staying in one place too much, so I spritzed it. Voila! And then I manipulated a little with the brush. So, makes me happy. I'm thinking now of where would this particular branch come to a point, you know? Where would the blooms on that stop? Because the branch ended or something like that. And see, that's just so soft and pretty. I don't want to do too much there. I already feel like I'm adding too much color, believe it or not. Okay, now I want to take and clean this brush, and I'm still working with the same brush because I like the tip on this one. You want to get a brush this is a number 12, and it's got a pretty decent tip. This is a fantastic brush, and I can get it to have a nice tip as well, but I find it just doesn't get me that control that I like with this one. And this is less expensive. Sometimes the less expensive brushes are the go-tos for a lot of the work that I like to do. If I need to scrub something out or just plunk in something here and there, and I don't want it to be too soft. A lot of the really good brushes are pretty soft. So when I need something with a little more control, I can go to a cheaper brush. Okay, so I'm sensing that I'm going to have a branch come through here, and then they kind of splay out. And I'll probably have some tips of branches popping out here and there. This is a little bit vacant, so I'm just gonna, I don't want to fill it all in, you know, but I want to connect it to something. I feel like it's a little isolate. Okay. Just connect it over here, and it didn't get, not a lot of spritz got on where I thought it did. Just kind of weaving it into that area. That's funny. Usually you don't get a straight line with the spritz, but I got a couple of them there. So I just broke them up. No problem, no worries. And I think at this stage it's the point where we have to let it dry 100%. Well, not 100%, sorry. We're going to let it dry, and then we're going to go in and start adding a little bit of darks where it's not too wet. Just in a few places. Then later we're going to add some more darks for intentional shadows. So we'll come back when it's dried just a little bit. Okay, so I'm back and it's dry, or relatively dry. I like to paint when things are slightly damp, because then things bleed together, and that is just, again, that out of control aspect of watercolor that I love. So that's kind of fun to do. We're going to use Payne's Gray, but I'm going to show you also how to mix your own Payne's Gray. And we're also going to try to use a little bit of a palette knife. So this will be fun. Okay, so as you can see, it's dried a little bit. There's still some moisture. Might be hard to see that from your end, but I know that that's the case. And I'm going to go into the areas that are not too wet, but yet still damp. So I'm looking for damp areas. There we go. So you can see how that is going to just kind of bleed on its own. I've got a nice dark shadow. Might be the inside of a blossom. It might be where the blossom cluster is kind of going back down and behind. This is super dry up here. I might be able to get a dark. You want to look for areas where the dark is already there, like right there, and just enhance it just the tiniest bit. This is a little more purple, so I'm going to do just a bit, and more towards the center. Putting that right to the edge of that doesn't make a lot of sense, but I make mistakes. We all do. Do as I say, not as I do. So putting it more towards the center makes more sense, because that's where you're going to see shadows more so than right on the edge of a cluster of blossoms. Right here's a nice area. Right there I could see potential. Maybe right there. And you see I'm just selecting a few spots, but you can see already how depth is starting to be created. That's sort of purple. I've got red on my brush. So while I've got the magentas on my brush, I'm going to hit those areas. Okay, so you can see here how it's really starting to give a little bit more depth and definition. I want to get back a little, check it out, and see how the design's working. And then I need some magenta, or some purple, violet, more so up here. There we Okay. And hopefully it's not too dry. Oh, it is. Do you see how that just bubbled? It's too dry. So I'll work on it in a second. I'll show you what to do when that happens. Here's some. And this is just awfully light. So it's going to need to be broken up a little if it's going to read as blossoms. Ooh, I like how that spread nicely. So in these, I know that's magenta there, but it's fun to put purple with the magenta sometimes too, and vice versa. Mix it up. Yeah, this up here really needs to be broken up with some darks as well as this. So I'm going to set down just some droplets of paint and spritz it here in a minute. And if that, then I'll manipulate it with my brush if I feel like things are wacky or just not working. Now that's a little strange what I just did. So when you feel like you've done something that's really going to throw off the feel of the painting, just go in and blend it with the surrounding area, and we can go back in and fix it later if I need to. That's just a little too much purple for a while. And when I come in near some of these, I'm going to dab my way out just a little, not with all of them, just a few, so that they're not all the same size and also not the same value. So it goes dark to light. That'll give it a bit, let it, you know, shift a little. And then right here, remember I've got these that are just sitting on the paper, and get my brush with the tip I like. And just mess it up a little. I know it's hard to see, my hand's probably right there in the way. Just gonna manipulate that ever so slightly, ever so. And you can start to see that it's starting to look like there's shadow areas. So I'm gonna lose this shadow on one side, blend it into just dabbing bits of paint into the other part of that cluster over here, so that it can look like it's integrated and not just this solid spot of dark. Okay, and this one, just blend it in one direction. Up here, it's so soft, I'm afraid to lose it, but if I don't lose a little of that, I will be in trouble later. So, you know, add just a little more color. It's so white, which is what I want, without that light, super light pink or the light colors, you know, and that's where Save the Whites, right? Those light colors are extremely important, but sometimes you've got this wall of white that it's too much and it needs to be broken up just a bit. And do this again. Okay. Not too bad. Okay, so I've got my cherry blossoms established. It doesn't feel like it, but when it dries too, we're going to add a little bit more depth to some of the shadows, and I'll show you how to do that once it's 100% dry. Then we're going to do a Japanese or Chinese-esque brush painting for the branch behind it. It's going to be exciting. I'll come back when it's all dry. So I'm back and it's dry, or relatively dry. I like to paint when things are slightly damp, because then things bleed together, and that is just again, that out of control aspect of watercolor that I love. So that's kind of fun to do. We're going to use Payne's Gray, but I'm going to show you also how to mix your own Payne's Gray. And we're also going to try to use a little bit of a palette knife. So this will be fun. So the Payne's Gray that I have right now is a little bit grainy because it's old and I'm also running out. So I say to myself, that's fine. I know that I can make my own Payne's Gray with burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Primarily ultramarine blue. That's the main color. Nice gray. And that gray just offsets the pink. So to one end I'm making it a little more warm for the branches, and then to the other end I can make it a little bit cooler, a cooler gray. Okay. And I'm going to turn this way. Pick up just a little bit of paint on that palette knife. And take the tip. Don't put the whole edge down. Don't put that whole side down. But you're going to follow that branch this way. See, I put too much of it down there. I'm going to have to work on that. And then allow for the branch to break off here underneath. You lift it. You're not going to paint through the cherry blossoms, of course. And this is not the full thickness of the branch. It's just establishing a random style, Chinese style of painting, so that you can have that feel. You know, it feels Japanese or Chinese, you know, when you're doing cherry blossoms. It really does. So okay, this I would have an offshoot probably here. And again, that's not the full branch. We're going to come in and work on that in a minute. From here, I feel like I want that to be established. And I can come back later too and do little offshoots like that. Okay, so that I can save for later. Right now I want to resolve this first because I'm kind of in trouble, and that's where I'm going to grab my cheap brush, get some clean clear water, and start to scrub a little. I love it when I make mistakes because that's really when I learn, and hopefully it helps you learn as well. Just gonna wet that area there. I'm not worried about getting it clear back to the white of the paper, but I do need to have some of that gray information removed because the branch is going this way and that's just space, negative space. Okay, so now that I've got that brush going, I am going to grab some of the paint that's down here still. And add to the branch shape. Blending it together. Whoops. it got too close to where I had the paper damp. So I'm going to have to wait and come back and finish working on that area for it to dry. I want to get clean clear water on the tip of my brush and take some of these wonderful little branch starters, and before they dry all the way, work with what they've got. It's drying awfully fast, so it looks like I'm past that point, which is okay too, because now my main goal is to finish off the look of a full branch with a light side. So we know that tree branches have light and dark sides because of the sunlight. And resolve that by making it look like there's clusters of blossoms blocking our view of the full branch. So you paint what you see, not what you know to be true. You paint what you see. So I am painting what my mind's eye thinks I could see of that branch through blossoms and petals. Actually, right here, it's pretty faint, so I'm going to let the top part of that branch show. And then in here, just really light. You could barely see what I'm putting on here. And that's good. I want it that way. And here, because I swooped off, I'm just going to make it look like that's an additional branch. Swoop is the technical term. So I'm painting in and around, and look at some of that pink is blending in with the branch. I love it. That's good. That's always a good thing. We want imperfection. These trees, the tree trunks and branches are never perfect. Sometimes you see them and you're just like, wow, that's perfect. Well, don't let it be. Art is a metaphor for life. Life is not perfect. It can sure be beautiful, though. That's why art is amazing, because we're depicting all that beauty. Okay, so see how I'm just resolving and completing the look of, oh, there's a branch here, and this is thicker. It's obviously going to taper. Things get thinner as they get towards the end. So you see how it's the large, really large branch, and then it splays off. And in fact, this is just not thick enough to substantiate the rest of this composition. So I will go in and fix that. Just adding spots. Where the branch would peek through the blossoms. And because it's wider up here, I need to find something down here that's peeking through as well. Then connect it to the main. The mothership, I'm connecting it to the mothership of the branch. And the more I mess with it, the more there we go. I do feel like this should be a darker gray right here. Just where it's connecting with this. It's okay that they're two different values because this one goes off that way. Technically speaking, this should be the darker value back here, and this should be lighter, but it didn't turn out that way, and I'm okay with that. This is where, you know, I'm breaking a rule unintentionally. It just happened. But I am going to blend some of that dark that we see here down further into this trunk because I don't want it to just seem like this floating dark spot. And I may go back in and adjust it even more later. Okay, so I'm just going to keep working each little branch and say, okay, well, how thick would this one be? And notice I'm not using gray. The gray was used to set down initially. Now I'm using more of a brownish gray. And then we can use some of that same color up here, just in little spots where it would peek through. This is a happy little branch, happy little squirrel. Just a hint. That's a super straight branch. I normally don't like branches to be that straight, but I was working with the blossoms I created too. So this one I like. It dips down and goes over. So that's a good thing. I'm going to turn it this way because I'm going to try and shade this side here. Although let me rethink that. I love, it's a silly thing, but see that little part that dips up there? I like the texture on the top edge of that branch. So normally I would be doing that, but I think I'm going to let it, and then this. And again, the dark side should be underneath, but I don't care. I like that shape. I'm going to protect that shape. The top shape of that, the top edge of that. It's very cool. Okay. And I'll continue with that same concept over here where it needs to be quite a bit wider. And go push back into the bush, or into the blossoms, and figure out where would the rest of that branch be. So now I need to connect it this way. Okay, and that gave that a support. Now I can come back to here, it's pretty dry, and finish. Just going to dab it and dab spots of it into this little pockets. can see that it's going to come this way a little. Widen that one just a bit. In fact, even give a little fork to it. Just the tiniest thing, like that, just by extending that here, even though it's so light pink, you could barely tell that there's blossoms there. But by extending it over here, it just gives that continuity, and it's like it says, you know, I definitely am branches and I'm here to do my job and support the blossoms. And so that's really what you're trying to find, is where would these branches be. I feel like this one can be a little thicker down low. Maybe have a little bend in it. Okay, this is the only one that doesn't seem supported, and that's mainly because there's such a light area here. So I will reconcile that really quickly. Let's see, it would be probably here. Wow, just look at how those two little strokes made such a huge difference. Don't want it too super detailed. Okay, and again, I've got the shadow on top, but I don't care. It looks better that way for that particular thing. Right here, it's got a little renegade, so I'm going to lift. A very small section. I don't think it would be, it's not going to stand out. Okay, well, and that is cherry blossoms. So I hope you had a good lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to see you post your pictures and your paintings in the comments below, or if you want to join Bodacious Brush Crushers, say that 3 times fast. If you want to join Bodacious Brush Crushers, I need more coffee, I think, then go to patreon.com dLauren Fine Arts. It's patreon.com/dLauren Fine Arts, and I'll put it up on the screen so you can go there. And there's a couple of free lessons that you can enjoy, see if this is something for you or not. But I really want to see your art. So, and Bodacious Brush Crushers, we have a special Facebook page where you can share your art and get a critique from me. I check in twice a week, and I can give you specific critiques. That's if you're a part of the patreon.com group, and then you're part of my art family anyway. But the Bodacious Brush Crushers, it's a special way that you can get some feedback, and from each other as well, so that's good. All right, well, happy painting, everybody. So right here is an example of yesterday. I felt like this was finished, and it is for the most part, but there just aren't enough shadows right in here. Don't need to do a whole lot of work, and then a little down here, but I feel like I want a tiny bit more definition. Yeah, that's right, you heard me say it. Dana, you're disappointing us. We thought you had like 0 definition. That was your goal. So I'm going to find just a little edge here and there, create a bit of a abstract shape that looks like it could be a radiating out shadow. And I'll do one up here too. And right along this edge there seems to be just not a lot of definition, and I want to make sure that it still stays very somewhat obscure, but I'm going to take just a smallish damp brush, and for this one I'm just going to dot it because I want to make sure that the color is distributed but it's very vague. Here we're going to pull shadows out just gently. Lose the edges of that. Not all the edges, but some of them. Hard edges are good. Tell yourself that, Dana. Hard edges are useful for definition. That's the hardest thing, is I'll put in a hard edge and then I just go in and wipe it out. Okay, so there you go. That gives you just a very quick idea of ways that you can soften, or I'm not soften, but add more detail in. And then once you put that paint down, soften the edges so that it integrates with the rest, and you can see a gradiating shadow. And so with now, to actually make it look even more gradient, go into the center while it's still damp and add a touch of darker paint. And that should technically blend itself because there's moisture around it. So it should kind of bleed out. If you need to help it, then feel free to do so with a lightly damp brush, not super damp at all. Here I feel like that edge is not, that's not where we would find a super hard edge, so that's why I just got rid of that, just right there. Okay? So hopefully that helps you with some problem solving and a little extra bonus for the cherry blossom lesson. All right. Happy painting, everybody.